Hi, and welcome to this video on 10 ways to learn Redstone faster. Now let me start by saying I am by no means a hardcore Redstoner. I simply love Redstone and have learned over the years how to create projects that are different than what other people create and unique and do the things that I want them to do. However, I also struggle a lot, especially early on. And as I look back now, I think there are ways I could have learned this a lot faster. So in this video, I'm going to show you some of the things I learned along the way that'll maybe help you learn Redstone a little faster. Let's get started with number 1. Now, the very first recommendation I would make would be to create research and development worlds. Now, I create one for each version of Minecraft that I'm working in. For example, the one you see right now is for version 1.13.2. And the reason I do that is because certain things work and then don't work in Minecraft. Or they don't work and then later on they do work. And you want to make sure that the world that you're planning on using a given device in works in the version that you're currently playing in. So that's why I do it. And I also put in certain features that make my life a lot easier as I'm developing my Redstone projects. Also, I don't want them to have to look good. If I'm building in a world where I want things to look good, it's going to take me more time. It's going to make it harder. I come into a world that's simple like this one, and I can build things quickly, easily, and not worry about what they look like. So let me show you how to set up a good R&D world. All you need to do is basically, let me get out of here, create a new world. So we're going to go down here and we're going to say create new world. And I'm going to call this R&D, if I could spell, D demo. All right, we're going to switch this over to creative and we're going to go to world options. We don't need any structures. We do need cheats. It's going to make life a lot easier. World type default, we're going to say super flat and customize. Go down here to presets. And as you can see, there is one called Redstone Ready. And Redstone Ready is the one you saw. I'm going to say use preset. It's got 52 layers of sandstone and then kind of warns you when you're reaching the end of the world here. And then there's bedrock at the bottom. So we're going to say, let's go with that. Everything else is good. You don't need a special seed or anything like that. So we're going to say create new world. And we'll wait for it to crank out. By the way, I am using my shaders and texture pack here, so things might look a little bit different, but I think you can figure it out on your own. All right, so here's our world. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock down the time. And the way I can do that is just by typing / game rule do daylight cycle false. And what that means is that the daylight cycle on Minecraft will no longer run. It'll stay at whatever time I set it. So you can see it's now set, and I am going to set the time to noon. All right, now if we look up, there's the sun right overhead, and we are set to noon, and it'll always stay noon. This makes things so much easier because you're not always having to reset the daylight or deal with working at night or anything like that. The other thing you're going to want to do is go into options, and difficulty comes in at normal. Put it on peaceful, and you won't have to worry about mob spawning or anything like that. It, again, makes things easier. Now, if you're working with some type of redstone that requires you to spawn in mobs, then by all means, you'll have to switch that game difficulty and maybe make it nighttime or things like that. So that is my first suggestion. Create these R&D worlds. Now let's move on to number 2. Okay, I've brought us back into my research and development world. And the next thing I want to talk about is to not get bogged down in the more complex aspects of redstone. And what I mean by complex aspects, I mean things like command blocks and comparators. Except for really simple things, comparators can get really confusing if you don't understand how they work. And I also am talking about things like plugins and mods and data packs and things that integrate redstone into them. All of those things will make it a lot more difficult to learn the basic mechanics of redstone first. And that one's pretty straightforward. So let's move on to number 3. All right, next up is basically 3 steps in one recommendation. And the 3 steps are: number 1, learn the basic simple aspects of redstone, what each component does, before you move on to learning more complex aspects. For example, if we look at this piston here, if we learn kind of how a piston works first. Now this is a sticky piston, and it went up and down. Okay, great, we got that figured out. The redstone connects the button, and you also see that the piston stays up for a little while, but then comes back down. Those simple things are obvious once you start to learn how to use redstone, but know those things first. Look at that redstone menu. If we go in here, we can see all the different redstone components, and yes, doors and trapdoors and things fall into the redstone category because they can be controlled by redstone. But go through each of these items and learn what they do and how they do it. And that is going to be the first big step in moving on to the next step. Now the next step is to take these things and create basic gizmos, which, for lack of a better word, basic gizmos from the things you've learned how to do. Now, for example, one of the things that you could learn would be like, let's say an observer. And you put an observer on the ground, and what it does is it looks in front of it to see if anything changes in front of it. And if it does, it puts out a quick redstone pulse. Well, if you know that that's how that works, you can put an observer facing it, and you'll see that you get what they call a clock, which is a constant pulsing of redstone, because it's looking in front of it, sees that block change, that block sees this block change, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. But until you understand how observers work, you wouldn't really know how the clock works. So go in, figure out how the basic things work. Step 2, learn how to put them together into very simple little gizmos. Now, I have a lot of videos that show you some simple gizmos, like clocks. I went through a period where I loved building clocks, so I built a bunch of clocks. And I don't mean telling time clocks, I mean basically like this, redstone clocks. Check those out by all means. Go into my redstone tutorials playlist and look at what I've got in there. I really make an effort to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing as opposed to simply doing it. And I think you're going to find that really helpful. And finally, step 3 is once you've learned how to build those basic gizmos, like a clock, then start integrating those together into your projects. So as you build, you know how each component works, you know how the subsections of a build work, and then you can integrate all of that together into your entire build. Instead of going all in, all at once, and looking at some huge project and trying to figure out why it does what it does, it'll make a huge difference. So let's move on to number 4. Now this is probably one of the most valuable tips I'm going to give you, and it's one that I find so many people don't figure out, and that is to make ugly redstone first. If you're coming up with a totally new design and you don't know how to do it, make it ugly. Just build it and try to put it together. Don't worry about how many blocks you're using or how elegant it is or how it looks or anything. Make it ugly first. Let me give you a great example. One of my viewers asked me to come up with a randomizer, something that creates random items. And I thought, I can do that. And I did figure it out. That video will be coming out soon. And the first thing I thought of is using a pig, because pigs wander around randomly, and as you can see he's doing right now, and would trigger these pressure plates randomly and basically generate random items. Now, it ain't pretty, and it's also not the right way to approach the problem. So I stuck with it for a while with the whole pig concept, no pig in there, but changed some of the redstone and came up with that design. And it was still really frustrating because it was huge and it's really ugly. So then I went on to this one and started it and went, no, that's not gonna work. And then went over here and tried a little different configuration underneath with other dispensers, and that still sucked. So then I went over here and tried something completely different. And I was onto something. And eventually, this is the randomizer I came up with, as opposed to that. Look at the huge difference. And I'll show you how it works in that video. Let me see, let's look real quick if it's working here. If we turn this switch off and we go up here, you can see it randomly cycling through items. And I go back here and it's stopped on a fishing rod. I have no way of knowing what that item is going to be. It randomly selected that item. So there you go. Started with that ugly crap over there and ended with this simplicity over here. So summing that up, don't be afraid to make ugly redstone first and try your ideas and refine them and move on from there. Now, number 5. Now my next recommendation is to refine your builds. Now I could have quit here with that randomizer and said, okay, this works, but I couldn't help but feel it was clunky. It was too big. I had the concept down, but I needed to refine it further. So I looked at it and I said, okay, where can I cut out some of these pieces? So I refined it to make it smaller, to make it more efficient, faster, to add some elegance to it. All of those things create a better and better redstone device. And when I finally got down to this, you can see there's like 4 whopping blocks and a lever. And that's it. So I obviously refined this down about as far as it's gonna go. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. Do I always get this small? No. But in this case, I did. So remember that as you build, and if you get it working, start refining. Say, what can I take out? What can I shift over? What can I do to make this faster, smaller, better? All right, let's go on to number 6. So you're probably saying to yourself, great, Mark, I got it working and now I'll refine it, but what if it doesn't work? And it should. Well, then you need to stop and look at the design. Is the design flawed from the get-go? Is that why it's not working? Or is there some error that you made in the actual redstone itself? If it should be working, then chances are you probably made an error somewhere. Let me give you a quick example. I just did a video recently on how to build a beer pong table. And what I did was I'm going to use a piston, though I didn't use a piston in there. But what I did is I ran some redstone like that. And then there was a button above it here. Now, if I push this button, you can see the piston goes up and redstone activates. And then I wanted to cover up this trench I built. So I did that and covered up the trench perfectly fine. But when I pushed the button, nothing happened. It took me a long time to figure out that when I'd covered it up, I cut the redstone right there. So I figured out a workaround to solve that issue. But it took me a while. I'm like, they should be working. And it wasn't that inherently the design was wrong. I had just made a mistake. So therefore, if it's not working, and it should be, don't just bail on your design. It could just be a simple error somewhere. All right, let's move on to number 7. For this tip, I'm going to use my randomizer again because it's such a good example of this. What would have happened if I would have just stayed married to the idea of a pig randomizer, I would have never discovered this very, very elegant design of generating a random item. So what you need to do as you're building, as you're designing, as you're learning Redstone, is realize that there are an infinite number of ways to build any particular device. So don't get all hung up on one way of doing it. Or if you watch somebody else's video, don't think that's the only way. Realize that there are just endless ways that you can make any of these things. All right, that was an easy one. Let's move on to number 8. I have to admit that in Minecraft Redstone, I have a certain passion for garbage cans and clocks. And in front of you, this is an example of one of my garbage cans, or garbage chests, or trash chests, or whatever you want to call it. But basically, these are designed to dispose of items. So if I throw some items in here, the chest closes, and I open the chest again, and they're gone. And they have been permanently destroyed. They're gone. They're not floating anywhere in here. And I started with a little more complex design and did a video on it. And then I improved on my own design based on some input from other people. So I came up with the Trash Chest 2.0, and that worked great. And then somebody suggested, hey, if you make it twice as wide, it will be better than twice as fast. And it was. So this is version 3.0. And I probably will continue to refine it because I think I figured out a way to do version 4.0. But the point is, you can always refine your designs or somebody else's. When I build things that somebody else has designed, I try to look for ways to make it better, to make it faster, leaner, all of those things. So don't be afraid to refine somebody else's design. If you do a video on it. Help the rest of us learn some of the techniques that you learned by refining somebody else's design. All right, onward. Now for tip number 9, I want to talk a little bit about videos. Now obviously if you're watching this video, you watch Redstone videos. So you've probably learned that there are a lot of Redstone videos out there where the person doing the video will show you step by step by step how to build their particular project. However, they don't tell you why they did something one way or another, or they don't tell you how it works, how it improved the design, how what they did makes for a unique device. And that's something I try to do in all of my videos, is talk a little bit more about the why. I mentioned the beer pong video I did. That one is almost a half hour long because I explain a lot about how and why. And that was to help people who'd never worked with command blocks before to learn how to use them and put together something that's really cool and a lot of fun. So when you go out there and you start to find videos that you like for how to build some particular design, look for YouTubers or people on Twitch who are showing you how and why, as opposed to just showing you step by step. Now, let's move on to the very last one. Now for this last tip, I'm going to look at Mr. Sad Piggy here. And why is Mr. Piggy sad? Because he came up with a great redstone design and never shared it with anybody in a video. And he wishes he had. What I mean by that is if you start building cool redstone stuff and come up with great designs that maybe nobody else has ever come up with before, and you want to learn redstone, teach redstone. Because to teach is to learn twice. When you come up with a neat design, you almost have an obligation to share it with the Minecraft community. Put it out there in video. It doesn't have to be gorgeous, just put it out there. And when you do, forcing yourself to do that will help you learn redstone faster and help you understand the intricacies of it because you have to explain it to other people. And yeah, it's tough sometimes to do videos like that, especially if you're not comfortable in front of the camera. But if you want to learn redstone, It's definitely one way to do it. So that's all I got. 10 tips to learning redstone a lot faster. Hopefully you find them helpful. And if you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, or share. And if you didn't like this video, please keep it to yourself. Thanks a lot for watching.